Welcome. Building off of momentum. Revisiting this topic, touchy topic. You know, I have certain folks that pay attention, so I'm gonna make sure this is catered to the right community. And if I speak the language, then you already know why I'm speaking the language and why I'm speaking in specific. So if anyone comes in here at any point and starts asking a whole bunch of questions because the language is not understood, then you already know why, right? So whoever does speak the language and you're fully cognizant, you're fully fluent in the language, then you'll be able to follow just fine, right? And I am in no, and I'm going to preface this whole live stream by saying in advance while I check in and, just brush upon this topic, I am in no way any type of expert in this field, right? I'm just a dude that's leaving a trail, right? Maybe some day far in the future, they'll either say I was talking about stuff that not too many people were talking about at a certain time, or they're just going to try and either clown or troll or push some sort of like, you should be, whatever. Like, he was the one that was talking about so what? What's up, Gage? How you doing? I was also the one that, at one point was maybe not the most positive person and wasn't doing the most positive things either. So what's your point? You know? Like what do you get? Like, if someone is already coming from a bottom position and working themselves up and not trying to depend on any type of connections to get higher, how are you going to attack that person? Like, what are you going to say to me? What are you going to do to me? You going to cancel me? That's why I fight back with positivity, with love, with respect. So anytime the negative trolling, any of that type of energy comes my way, I brush it off, because you can't hurt me. You can't. Because like I said, I push forward with love and respect. So there's nothing you can say that can fight against that. So anyways, let me get back to the topic, right? Oh, well, hopefully I make the time worth your while. And I'm here putting up Calc SD back on the thumbnail. So if you know, you know. I'll be speaking in code. So if you speak the language, then you already know, right? Now, with that being said, building off momentum, right? And I already prefaced this thing, and last time I spoke about this, there was an overwhelming turnout, which was interesting, and not too many people were chiming in, which was very interesting to me, but that's neither here nor there. We'll continue. So building off momentum, and again, I preface this whole thing by saying I'm no expert in this area of discussion, right? But I will say there are some similarities, right? Because I do hear people talk about, well, I've been at this for like 2-3 years and nothing, right? And I'm not going to say that's like the, overwhelming majority of people that engage in this and are saying that. No, that's actually not too common. And a lot of this is bro science regardless, right? So if we're going to be honest, it's like no one really knows, just like the crypto market, right? Like, you don't know what's going to happen next, right? And in an interesting way, your body is kind of like that as well, especially when you're dealing with smooth muscle as opposed to skeletal, right? So now, if I've said this in the last live stream regarding this, think about your most stubborn body part, right? Sometimes for men, it's their calves, like their lower calves, the soleus area, right? Or maybe sometimes for men, it's their upper chest, right? Or for sometimes it could be their biceps, So think about your most stubborn area. Remember, this is skeletal. And multiply that, either square it or cube it, and think about how challenging that is, right? And that's what this is like when we're dealing with smooth, right? So, you when it comes to symmetry, you want to think about everything when it comes to the aesthetics of your body, right? Like if we're talking again about skeletal, a lot of women, for example, say, oh, if he's not wearing sweats, there's a reason why he's not wearing sweats. Excuse me, there's a reason why he's not wearing shorts and he's wearing sweats. It's because he's got chicken legs, right? And then if a guy is actually approachable, where you can have this type of topic where he just doesn't go right into like defense mode, he's probably going to say something ridiculous like, well, I don't need to work out my legs. I walk all the time. I play basketball. I play soccer. So then why are you working out your upper body? What sense does that make? Right? So now when we talk about other areas, right, you also want symmetry and you want aesthetics. So like the thumbnail, when we're talking about, L versus G, and we're talking about the traction versus the expansion, right? Then you have to be able to, in my humble opinion, and again, this all kind of correlates to genetically what your starting point is, right? Some guys have a 2-inch differential between L versus G, and yeah, so you do what you got to do, lizard, and name checks out. But some people have a 1-inch differential, right? So some people, like everyone's different here, just like abs. The way your abs are shaped, everything's different genetically, right? Some people have a crazy 3 or 4-inch differential, and those are usually the guys that are self-conscious. Now, I think anywhere between a 1 to 2-inch differential, symmetrically and aesthetically, is probably the ideal place to be, because those are usually the ones that have the least amount of insecurities. So with that being said, getting to the point of building off of momentum, right? And again, skeletal and smooth are very different, right? So you want to be able to, like, when I have tried this in the past, right? Because again, this comes to bro science, but with skeletal, there's not as much bro science, right? Because there's real science. This is just like, we're talking about decades and decades and decades and decades, and a lot of money poured in for double-blind, placebo-tested information that's been published on behalf of, the findings related to skeletal. Whereas in comparison, smooth doesn't have that, right? The money has not been put into that. So that's why I say bro science. Now, anecdotally speaking, in my own past experiences, like I said, if you're talking about like a trouble spot, right? And your trouble spot is so challenging to be able to get past, get beyond, well, I have noticed in the past that when you build off of momentum, because, you have to be able to kind of swerve like contradicting information that comes out. Well, I'm glad everyone is, getting theirs tonight or today. So that's a good thing. But you know what's interesting? Whenever I do the naughty, that was like one of my tricks because I heard Jeremy used to do the same thing, right? So I would basically ask that same question to my partner, and then, you know, fireworks when we get past down to one, you know, and that was a cool trick. When you have control, you have control. But I have noticed building off of, because again, you have to swerve contradictory information that's coming from wherever. Because once you get certain information that has literally changed the course of how you think, then it's like you can't look back anymore because it's actual wisdom that was gained through experience, right? So once that happens and it changes you, and what I mean by you can't look back anymore is because you may have people that are experts or they're giving information and you've already elevated. Once you elevate and you see people from different, like whatever their so-called background or expertise or, you know, excuse me, their I guess like their achievements, their certificates, whatever they have, right? It doesn't matter anymore. Because once you've achieved certain levels, you're not listening to anyone anymore because you've already done it yourself. And what worked for you is what you're going to stay with until you need to adapt and adjust, right? So what I have noticed, besides nutrition, because nutrition is king or royalty, and that is basically always top, right? It's like what you should always put at the top of the list. But as far as exercises are concerned, I have noticed that momentum and building off of momentum is what has always worked. And you'll have people that say, well, you know what? You need to give your body a rest and you need to rest it more. You need to do half the volume. That's not what I've noticed works. I've noticed it not only works for skeletal muscle, but it also works for smooth muscle. Meaning, I'm not talking about the rest and half of the volume. I'm talking about building off of momentum where you put in more work and more work and more work, and you carefully pay attention to your body and you build off of momentum. Now, of course, you have to be in tune where you're not allowing yourself to burn out, for sure. But I do think a lot of guys, a lot of people overdo that whole you need to rest thing. Because like it's an arbitrary thing. Like when in actuality, it's not objective, it's not neutral, it's not impartial, it's subjective. That means you have to be able to apply it to you. There's not some set, okay, 3 days off, 2 days on, three. No, every single person is different. So you have to create that for yourself. You have to understand what your body can handle and what it can't as your own person, your own individual results. So the next man, the next person is going to be different. So you can't just take, okay, this person is experienced because they have 6 years in, or they have 8 years in, or they have this, or they sell this product. And as a result, I'm going to follow everything they say because they're some sort of expert. No, you have to stay consistent. You have to stay in it. And you have to be able to formulate your own determinations as a result of what you have learned. What I have anecdotally experienced is where building off of momentum has gotten me the best results in not just skeletal muscle gains, but smooth muscle gains. So I have started with a 1-inch differential. That means my G is kind of always up, where my L is going to be always appearing less because my G is up. You feel me? So as a result, like, most people would then lean in towards the L more and be like, you know what? I want to attack the BPEL as opposed to the MEG, right? So that's actually not what I do. Yeah, of course I want my BPEL to go up, but I'm still focused on my MEG, even though my starting point was high because I only have a 1-inch differential, right? But it didn't matter because for me, I knew it didn't even matter that, okay, my MEG is up and I only have a 1-inch differential, so maybe I should focus on my BPEL. No, I didn't think that way. I thought, you know what? I'm still just going to work on my MEG. I'm going to keep working my MEG, because some people say, well, if your MEG goes up so much, then it's going to be challenging for you to work on your BPL. Well, you know what? That's a risk I'm going to have to take. And instead of just, that's tried and tested, that's true, and that's like written in stone, I'm not going to, this is all bro science anyways, right? So I just focused on my MEG because I know that's a 3-dimensional, if not, it's a multifaceted growth type of outlook or perspective to attack. It's not just linear, right? So as a result, there's a lot more involved there, and it's a lot more challenging just because of the components involved, right? So if we're talking about spongiosum and cavernosum and the albuginea, then we have to be able to do everything that's necessary, whether you do any kind of fascia loosening, if you do any kind of, massage work, if you do any kind of, almost like a pre-exhaust stretching, which would be like, any type of bundled work, anything like that, you probably want to do all of that, right? So me, I focus on MEG. And what I've noticed is the building off of momentum mindset has always worked, because there have been times in the past, right? And again, you can't really compare skeletal to smooth, but I'm just using it as an example because there are similarities, even if anatomically speaking and physiologically speaking, they may not be the same. There are still things you can learn from the approach in training both areas of cells, right? So when it comes to skeletal, again, remember, we have stubborn, lagging parts that, we feel like we train and train and train and train, and they're not really responding, right? So I've had this throughout my time working out for decades, and I've always been able to eventually overcome all of that. And how did I do it? I did it by following that same protocol, which is building off of momentum. So this goes against what a lot of guys talk about when they say you need rest. When in actuality, if I would have rested more, I wouldn't have gotten past those plateaus where I was able to get gains that I wasn't able to get prior to having the mindset of building off of momentum, because I was stuck. These were lagging, stubborn areas genetically. So I really had to push and work and work and work and work. And sometimes, yeah, maybe I overworked, but it worked. So that's the point. Now, when it comes to smooth, I approach the same thing. And if my focus is MEG, then I just use the same mindset, right? Obviously, the type of training is different because you're not working off of like micro tears. You're working off of like remodeling, right? So as a result, loosening and remodeling, right? So, and angiogenesis, of course. But regardless of the type of training you use, because there's only a few types of, just like in the gym, you go to the gym, like there's only 6 muscle groups, right? There's legs, there's back, there's chest, there's shoulders, there's triceps, and there's biceps. Wait, legs, back, chest, shoulders, triceps, biceps. 6, right? So with 6, really, if you kind of really peer at it, there's only like 3 exercises for every body part, right? If there's 6 main body parts, 6 main muscles to focus on, which I just pointed out, there's only 3 exercises for each. So you're talking about 18 exercises. Everything after that is just a remix. You're just remixing and combining and trying to get fancy with the same things and just finding different ways to, like, okay, you can detail in this specific area by doing this, put your stance this way or your grip this way. It's just a remix. The same thing applies to smooth when we're talking about BPEL and MEG, L versus G. There's only a few different types of training methods, right? Yeah, there's all these like extra little remixes the same way, but you just focus on the different training methods we know exist, right? So that's fine. But where I tend to differentiate myself is that whole resting thing. I have experienced that being able to build off of momentum has always worked for me. And that's the whole point of today's live stream, where I was able to get gains. And don't get me wrong, I'm approaching 3 years of consistency. I've been doing this on and off for a long time, right? 3 years, almost 3 years of consistency. And in the first year, not even the first year, in the first like less than 8 months, I got 90% of my gains, more than 90%. So that means that in over 2 years of consistently training, I've been at a standstill, right? Now people could say, well, take a decon and take the decon and make sure it's long enough. But that again goes against my building off of momentum. So what I have been experimenting, and I still have to get to a place where I can, after this place has been achieved, I can say without a doubt, I can literally relay this information honestly. Because again, I have nothing to sell. I have no products. I don't even monetize this channel. So and there's no subscription, no Patreon, no Discord, nothing like that, right? So there's no kind of, ulterior motive here. So with that being said, with a clear conscience, I need to be able to say honestly, without a doubt, I have gotten through certain sticking points and I've gotten to the next higher levels, right? And I've done it in many different fields. And if we were to talk about any of those fields, I can say without a doubt that I have achieved those certain levels in those fields. But when it comes to this, in all honesty, I still have to achieve a bit more to say that without any type of doubt, in all honesty, I have gotten there. And now I can basically relay this information at any time to anyone, whoever a non-believer is. That's not to then, try and convince a non-believer, because if you're a non-believer and it hasn't worked for you, then it hasn't worked for you. What can I say? What can I do? Right? I don't need to lie about what's happening with me, but I do need to let you know that while I'm on route to getting to certain levels, I'm still at a point right now. I'm very close. Don't get me wrong. Very close to, getting past a certain plateau where then I can say I've reached it. I've reached a certain level, right? And like I said, I'm going on almost 3 years of consistency. So in 3 years of consistency, I am now leaning towards that building off of momentum thing that I've mentioned. So I would say within the next maybe 6 to 8 months, I will have a much clearer picture on all of this to be able to relay and say, you know what? I was right. Building off of momentum is what did it. I stayed with it. I didn't flim flam, go, this way, and then I didn't stay with it long enough, and then I tried something else, and then I went to something else. No, I'm not going to do all that. I'm staying with what I'm staying with for at least a good 6 to 8 months straight, because it's going to take a while. It's going to take a long time to be able to execute this, because when it comes to expansion work, you always have to combat edema. And the problem with edema is that's your body sending signals. Your body is literally telling you it's a little too much. It's like, dial it back a little bit, relax, right? So you can't go past that. You can't force it. So in order to get to where I want to get to, I literally have to condition myself over a period of the next 6 to 8 months to be able to give you an honest prognosis of what has happened. Because like I said, I'm not selling anything. I have nothing there's no ulterior motive. So once that has happened, I'm relaying this information because this is my public journal. Maybe sometime in the future, people will look back and say, well, I remember this dude. He was talking about this. He was talking about this. This is the type of stuff no one really talks about. Well, and they're either going to say that and say, he's kind of ahead of his time at that time, right? Or they're just going to use it as fuel to spew hateful negativity. Either way, it doesn't matter to me. Of course, I'd prefer the positive comments and remarks, but if you want to fight with negativity, I'm going to fight you with love and respect right back. So you can't win. And that's really it. I've been going on for almost a half hour now. I basically broke down everything I think, everything to kind of say I still have about 6 to 8 months before I can give you a real prognosis of this methodology, which is building off of momentum. And that's it, So with that being said, if anyone has anything they want to say, they want to contribute, they want to add, feel free. But for the most part, I've broken down what I wanted to break down today regarding this topic. And that's really it. As usual, I value your time. I appreciate anyone who's checked in today, who came through. And yeah, just wanted to put this out there, leave my trail as I tend to do. And with that being said, I'm thinking I'm going to sign off now. And until next time, I might do another live stream at some point just on handstand practice. Just letting you know in advance. So if you see me just doing handstands and I just make a whole live stream on handstands, basically what it takes, I might just do a half-hour live stream on handstands. Because the reason I would do that is to show, because workouts come in different forms, right? Whether you box, any type of MMA, whether you're a runner, you're in the gym, calisthenics at the park, whatever it is. In order to get certain movements like that, like balanced movements, they're challenging and they require a lot of effort. So I just want to show how, in order to get good control of that type of movement, it requires a significant amount of diligence and consistency. So that would be the whole premise of the next live stream. Should I do that live stream? I probably will. And it's a good thing because I can always go back myself to these live streams, and maybe, who knows, it might be 5-6 years from now. Remember that handstand live stream I did like a while back? I did a whole live stream on it, So maybe I'll go back and revisit it. Because, again, this is a public journal, right? So it's for that purpose. It's not just for people, like publicly, for whoever's watching and tuning in, but it's for myself as well. So, yeah, that's really it. And with that being said, I will catch you all next time.